The two pillars of this are confusion and degradation. And if you can keep people confused and you can keep people in a state of constant degradation, meaning saying things they know are untrue, undermining everything they used to believe, feeling like they are worthless and they don't have the sort of personal strength to push back on this stuff, then you have that fertile ground for, and this is the menticidal process, as he calls it, you have that fertile ground to make people believe whatever you want them to believe. And I think that for example, the gender madness stuff or the transgender stuff today is really one of the most perfect examples of how this plays out in a modern liberal society overall. It's, again, the same processes, but they can't lock you. It's not Maoist China. You're not locked in a cell with people beating you saying, say the thing, say the thing. But as you know, Dave, they will say the thing or else we'll take you off the platform. Say the thing or you will get fired. Say, it's different levels of coercion, but it's still coercion.
I'm Dave Rubin, and joining me today is the host of the Buck Sexton Show, as well as the author of the new book, Manufacturing Delusion: How the Left Uses Brainwashing, Indoctrination, and Propaganda Against You, my friend Buck Sexton. Buck, look, and he's holding the book. You were supposed to be here in studio. Somebody has a little tummy ache, and we had to do this on Zoom, so you're showing me the book digitally.
I know. I'm just protecting your health, Dave. That was what it comes down to. I don't want to be passing whatever. The truth is we're here in South Florida, and I hate to say this because you and I love the Florida, and we're both former New Yorkers. So we have this whole journey in common. And I assume at one point you didn't even have a beard, and now we both have something resembling a beard. Yours fuller than mine. But South Florida, the one thing that you find is that we have more stomach bugs down here. And we trade respiratory viruses is what they get up north because of all the cold and whatever. But down here, because of all the third world travel and the port and everything, stomach bugs, dude. So nothing is perfect. Not even Ron DeSantis' Florida.
That was Buck's way of saying if he has to leave the small box at any point during the next 25 minutes, you'll understand why.
On the show. Yes.
All right. It's good to see you, my friend. I'm sorry we're not doing this in person, but we will figure that out for next time. The title of the book, How the Left Uses, or the subtitle, How the Left Uses Brainwashing, Indoctrination, and Propaganda Against You. I thought it was just honesty, niceness, decency, and humor. Have I been completely off on what these lefties are doing?
So let me walk you into a little bit of how this came about, right? Because also another thing that we share in common is the looking around at the world during COVID and saying, okay, you people are crazy. Like you've actually lost it. This is no longer in the realm of, we're not talking about the top marginal tax rate. We're not even talking about whether, anchor babies should be citizens or like something that's in a normal realm of political discourse. You're telling me that double masking when I sit down or go to the bathroom is required for safety, but then sitting there for 2 hours during the meal isn't. Like, no, and that's just one of 1,000 things. We had the people playing the clarinet, right, in the bubble, and all the experts were telling us to do this. Okay, this isn't a COVID book, though. This is how is it that you make people do crazy stuff, and how is it that this has been so successful in so many places in the modern era, for sure. And to do this, I went back and looked at the origins. And so there's a lot of history, a lot of research. And like you, Dave, I actually wrote my book, which I
was very happy to hear that when we talked about it a few months ago, because it's a little known secret in the industry.
I gotta tell you, and this is like a little bit of a digression. And
we had the same editor, right? I think we had the same editor.
Yeah, so I really
who's wonderful. Yeah,
because I know about your process, and we had the same book editor. So it's like, but you wrote yours, I wrote mine. This thing of like people, and some places, some channels, a lot of people that they churn out these books. And like they didn't write it, and it's all just like a sales thing because they put their name on it, the whole thing. I'm like, look, if you want to say you collaborated with somebody, that's one thing. But they're like, why do you want to write your book? I'm like, one, because I can, and two, I'm not going to say something to all of my audience that's not true, right? So anyway, That's just how I feel about it. Like, I don't care if you pay somebody, like if I pay Pete Hegseth just lifted 315 pounds. If I paid someone to pretend they were me, like with the hair and like the scraggly, like wannabe beard and do 315, I didn't lift 315 pounds. So I'm not going to say that I did. Anyway, this is.
Do you remember, real quick, do you remember about 20 years ago, Charles Barkley had an autobiography that came out and he said he had a ghostwriter or whatever, but then he goes on a publicity tour and they keep asking him all these questions. He's going, well, that didn't happen. That never happened. It didn't happen that way. And they're going, it's in the book. It's in the book over here.
No, I didn't know, but I'm sure. I mean, that's not a surprise at all. By the way, it's not only happened. It hasn't only happened to Charles Barkley.
No, it's happened a lot. Yeah,
with their books and on our side. Anyway, so yes, I wrote the book, and that's why I actually made sure there was like a lot of. I wanted to learn as I did it, and the biggest challenge that I had, I think, was cutting down a lot of the research that I found really interesting that I wanted people to know about without slowing down the narrative. And I think we mentioned we have the same editor, right? So she did a very good job of being like, okay, this is interesting, but like, you can't have chapter 1 be 60 pages, right? So you need to kind of get this thing moving. But I went back to Pavlov and conditioning. I went back to the earliest scientific efforts to truly understand how a brain can be controlled. And there's sort of a seminal event that occurred. It was actually in 1924. So you have the Soviets take over, the Soviet Revolution or the Russian Revolution becomes the Soviet Union. And in 1924, Pavlov is the most famous scientist in Russia, in some ways the most famous scientist maybe in the world. And in his laboratory of dogs, where they had been conditioning, they really called it conditional reflex, but they had been conditioning these dogs to respond not to people always say a bell, it was actually a buzzer or a metronome. But they had these animals, and they never called it training, they called it conditioning, have responses to stimuli. There's a flood that happens, and the flood at the very last minute, these dogs and you and I are both dog guys too. So like, as I was actually reading the history of this, it's like, oh my God, the dogs. I was getting really agitated about this. But the dogs were terrified because the water's rising in the kennel where all these Pavlovian dogs are kept, or Pavlov's dogs are kept. And at the last minute, some of the employees basically at the lab run in and save them. But what was fascinating was that these dogs had had conditioning over years. And in many, not all, but in many cases, the conditioning was entirely wiped away in one night of extreme trauma. And in some cases, not only was the conditioning wiped away, but they actually had major behavioral changes that stayed for months, if not years, effectively permanently with dogs after this. And so what it showed was that extreme external stimuli can have dramatic changes on psychological processes and behavior. That scientific revelation comes in 1924. Then you have the rise of the Soviet Union. With the rise of the Soviet Union, you have the new Soviet man and the mass communist experiment, really nightmare, of a totalitarian society in total control. You have the rise of Nazi Germany. You have the rise of Maoist China. You have these totalitarian societies that try to achieve really a mechanistic, almost like a robotized version of humanity. And it wasn't building on Pavlovian principle. Like Pavlov had no part of this. It wasn't like that was his goal, was to teach people how to do this. But it is the beginnings of the mind control field and behavioralism that then led to people understanding more about cults and the era of cults we went into. And then I just bring it to the modern day where there are tactics, there are things that totalitarian societies do that are replicated. And I get into the specifics about this, replicated with gender identity stuff, with the trans kids and trans theory, replicated with BLM, replicated with obviously COVID and these things where you create a sort of politicized madness by using techniques of totalitarian societies of the past. And there you have a book, and that is the book. So there you go.
That was an excellent elevator pitch, man. You've nailed it. Despite the ailment of the stomach, you've been able to put this thing together. What do you think it is about the mind? Mostly you're focusing on the left here, and we can talk about the right if you want as well. And obviously plenty of people on the right over the last couple of years have gone crazy for a series of reasons, and COVID stuff too, and we all kind of failed in our own way.
Actually, I was thinking about this because I think people believe that I wrote this. When I wrote this, it was really coming off of COVID and entering the era. I wrote this during the Biden years, really. And then because of publishing and because of the CIA review, which took 5 months, but a lot of the stuff that, the tactics I'm seeing among some people on the right now in a troubling way. And it's the same. The thing that would be most familiar to people is really the replication of cult indoctrination stuff, which I get into in the book. I mean, Shinrikyo, you have people that are educated and have come from a highly educated society in Japan. They're educated themselves. They're not like starving, impoverished third worlders, and they're paying thousands of dollars for what they're told is bathwater from this guy who's the messiah of this. Like, how do you get people? And I get into Jim Jones and that kind of stuff too. But there's a replication of that's going on the right today that I do find very troubling.
Do you find that there is a difference in the personality type that would allow someone on the left to go this way versus how someone on the right may go that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the left-wing mind tends to be more consensus and therefore communal and community-based, right? Is generally less involved in individualism or less prone to think about the importance of individual accomplishment, individual freedom. And then also, obviously, statism comes along with that, or wants a overwhelming state apparatus, often to be in place of God, often to be in place of family. And I get into this there's a chapter called Menticide. In, again, my book, Manufacturing Delusion, which so I got to tell you.
Does he have a book? Does the guy have a book? I think there's a book.
Manufacturing Delusion, that you guys actually have to buy. You know what the biggest compliment I'm getting on it is from so many people, including in our business, who have they're like, I read the first couple chapters. It's actually really good. And I'm like, on the one hand, thank you. On the other hand, it's actually really good. Do you know what I mean? There's a little bit of a thing.
Couple of chapters. It kind of peters out at chapter 4, but that's still better than most things these days.
But just the surprise that any of it is good, that I'm coming up against. I'm like, no, it's a good book. Like, I actually put a lot of work and effort into it. But in the Menticide chapter, there's this guy, Joost Meerloo, and he changed his name to Joost, by the way, from Abraham, because he was trying to evade the Nazis and occupied Netherlands in World War II. So he was trying to deal with that reality. But he was a psychiatrist, and then did some debriefings he did counter propaganda against the Nazis for the Allies, then did debriefings and interactions with Nazi prisoners after toward the end of the war. And he came up with this idea of menticide, and there's two pillars. And there's a more extensive, and I get into the details of the process, but the two pillars of this are confusion and degradation. And if you can keep people confused and you can keep people in a state of constant degradation, meaning saying things they know are untrue, undermining everything they used to believe, feeling like they are worthless and they don't have the sort of personal strength to push back on this stuff, then you have that fertile ground and this is the menticidal process, as he calls it. You have that fertile ground to make people believe whatever you want them to believe. And I think that for example, the gender madness stuff or the transgender stuff today is really one of the most perfect examples of how this plays out in a modern liberal society overall. It's, again, the same processes, but they can't lock you. It's not Maoist China. You're not locked in a cell with people beating you saying, say the thing, say the thing. But as you know, Dave, they will say the thing or else we'll take you off the platform. Say the thing or you will get fired. It's different levels of coercion, but it's still coercion.
How much of it do you think is all planned either by the globalists or the KGB or shadowy government things, or the Democrat Party, for example, like directly coordinated versus a certain amount of it that is probably just modern nature of the internet, everyone being slammed with conflicting opinions in a time when our institutions also happen to be failing us?
That's a great question. The end of the book, I get into how, because it's like, well, why is the modern science of mind control, like, why do I started this Pavlov in 1924. Now, of course, there had been, there's been like religious movements and fervor stretching back for millennia. And there was the craziness of people think of the Salem witch trials. That wasn't actually very many people. There were series of similar, freakouts, if you will, witch mania in Europe that had occurred around the same period and stretching for hundreds of years before that, where thousands, women were burned at the stake. There were witches. It was crazy stuff. people went mad, right? There's the famous Mackey book, The Madness of Crowds, or that's the end of it, right? Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. So we've been, and that's really about economic madness. And so that's not new, but what is new, it's not that the crowd, and Gustave Le Bon, and I have some quotes from him in the book, he's about mass psychology, and it's like, shout the slogan, carry the placard. By the way, very useful to understand the Alinskyite left and Democrats in America. What's unique here, and why I start with this, is that the rise of mass media alongside mass mind control is what is different now. And that's the uniqueness that you see in these huge totalitarian societies, where now it's like everywhere you go, there's the poster of Stalin. Everywhere you go, there's, the dear leader is like being blasted from the speakers, or, the Chinese communists use radio all the time. Radio was hugely important in communist China. So, to your point, today, we are walking around in an era of constant, you could argue, conditioning, effectively programming by these devices and these platforms, whether it's social media. And now when you add artificial intelligence into this, and the ability to have machine learning giving you, in a constant feedback loop, more of what maybe you think you want, but it's actually what somebody else wants. We are all being programmed in real time in a way that even, in Stalin's era, it's hard to have people with truncheons on every corner, like beating people. I mean, they tried, but like there's actually, it's different when you're doing it to yourself. And that's what I see going on now. And that's why I don't think the COVID madness, Dave, would have been possible without social media. We would have thought that social media would have freed us from it. And now with X and Elon, I think that's more likely, and Rumble. But what we did see actually was, no, they had seized the telegraph office. It's just the telegraph office, so to speak, was Facebook and YouTube and all these platforms that were able to engender a mass madness.
You think there's a way out of all of this, or are we in just some sort of repetitive phase now until either AI just kind of completely takes over, or some of these people succeed and we end up just in totalitarian states because we're all just so damn broken? I mean, are you, I take it you're not going to end the book black-pilled, right? You're not black-pilling us at the end. What are you giving us at the end there?
The good news is that it really actually all does come down to the individual. And I can take you back to Pavlov's lab and the dogs, right? So bring us full circle to where it started. One of the great confounding factors that Pavlov came up against in his research was some dogs just weren't being conditioned. They're like, I'm happy and I'm going to do what I do. And you're not going to, I'm not going to get all excited when I'm supposed to, or I have excitation and inhibition, these different, anyway, don't have to get into all the sort of laboratory speak they use, but I'm not going to respond the way that you want me to. I'm going to act this way. Some of them took to it, some of them didn't. Some of them resisted, some of them were easy to mold. And all of that research was done with an eye to, if this is present in dogs, it must be at some level present. So it's even more complicated with people, of course, is the reality. And this is also why, brainwashing and these things, they work on some people much more easily than they do on others. But it is about individual vigilance and understanding. And I think that that's more necessary for people now than ever, because there's just so much going on around you that is meant to make you think certain things. And you would think, Dave, that in an era where we have more access to information than ever before, you have a better informed public. But I think increasingly you have a more molded public, as in public opinion is being directed by people in ways that we need to be more aware of. Because, you're not just going to the library and getting books and picking these things out. Every action you take now is being directed, cataloged, and involved in the kind of algorithmizing of life that we live. So I think that's really important for everyone.
Buck, before I ask you a couple things that are off book topic, why don't you show the book one more time?
Well, it's called Manufacturing Delusion, so you have a large audience of smart people, Dave. And so I was told I must.
We do move books here.
A large audience of smart people. That is all of you. And you must buy this book because, I'll tell you this. Listen, I got beat week one. It did very well in the first week of release, but I got beat by a former stripper named Bunny XO, whose book is the #1 book in America to this day, who is the wife of a country music star. So that is where we are. That is literature in America today. I'm not passing judgment. I'm just saying she has a thong photo on the cover of the book. And I wanted to put mine, but Dave's editor was like, Buck, your thong photo is not selling any copies. We have to pull it. And I was sad.
I'm going to text Helen right now and tell her that that was completely unnecessary. You would have moved more books. In our remaining time, Buck, let's just talk about a few things going on in the political world. Look, we got 9 months till the midterms. It feels like it's probably not going to go well, although it is hard for me to believe that people are going to think that the Democrats are the answer to all of this. How you feeling about things?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to lose the House. And I think that a lot of the squabbling and the each your own on the right and the stuff that we see going on right now is suddenly going to fade away when we realize that these communists are lunatics and that once they're back in power, they're going to try even a little bit of power. You're going to see the madness. They have not changed. They have learned nothing. They have agreed to nothing new. Like they are the same as they were under Biden, the same as they were during the COVID madness and forcing the shots or, whatever, pick your craziness. It's all still there. They have not moderated. And so I'm not, I'm never blackpilled insofar. Like people always ask me, this is the thing I get at the end of any live speech. I'm sure you've had this many times too. They're like, how do we win? And I always say, for how long? There's no such thing. Like, the movie never ends, folks, right? This is never done. It's not like, oh yeah, now all the people in society who have bad ideas and are like self-indulgent and crazy have gone away and we live happily ever after. This isn't a fairy tale. So, I think that people should really, the two things I would say about the next 9 months, obviously, well, for the Trump side of things, they've got to just focus on the economy and affordability. And if that sounds like some response to AOC's Marxist crying about, home prices or whatever, it's reality. People are upset by it, and you've got to address the concerns of the citizenry. And I think that in the meantime, people should look at what's going on and say they just want Trump to run up the scoreboard with as much good stuff as he can. And people should enjoy this while we can, because it ain't going to last. And I think everyone's gotten a little used to very quickly, oh, the good guys are in charge. Oh, good things are happening. For now, remember, I'll come back on your show, Dave. We'll talk about what things are like under the Newsom administration, and you're at Gitmo, and we're doing this long distance,
Yeah, exactly. I was good.
Orange, like an Al Qaeda guy in the orange jumpsuit with the, it'd be like, Dave, how are they treating you with your long beard? You'd be like, the food's pretty good.
I assume they would still let me Zoom once a week. Well, to that point, what do you think we have to do to heal a little bit of what's going on the right? Because you and I think, are seeing a lot of the same issues. It's become almost impossible to figure out a right way to deal with. Do you combat some of this stuff? Do you just let it disappear? It's hard to tell how much of it is algorithmically charged, as you referenced earlier, or just foreign bots. But we've seen some people go a little bananas, let's say.
Yeah, I think that a lot of them are gonna. I think that there's going to be like a reconciliation commission of some kind. Not really, but I think that people are going to come back and say, there'll be a little bit of mea culpa here and there. There'll be a little bit, because ultimately, this is what happens when you have people who the whole right-wing media ecosystem has created fighters, basically, right? I mean, we think about you and me. I was CNN, for God's sakes, for years, like sitting there just getting punched.
You freak.
Being treated like a sideshow freak. And like, we're used to fighting, and we're used to having the entire media ecosystem completely layered against us and being, and now it's like, we sit here, we're like, wait a second. I mean, like, we're more culturally relevant than the left. We're much more ascendant. All of our top people are far more competent and capable in media than theirs. Like, it's just, I think we just look around and the success has been a little bit of a, and so what happens is you got people that all they've been doing is training for war, so to speak, ideological war, and they just get itchy trigger fingers. They start shooting at each other. And that's what I've been seeing. And I'm just like, I can't stop it. I wish I could, but it is going to stop, because this quiet we have from the commies right now, Dave, this is not, they are pissed. They are going, the second that they see an opening, a real opening, they are going to pull out the truncheons and the jackboots, and we're going to be like I said, I'll be doing the Rubin show live from Gitmo, and I'll be like, Dave, are you okay? And that's, that'll be kicking down my door too. Be like, you want to sell next to him? I'm like,
but at least you've got your coffee and I've got my tequila,
That's all. That's, what I mean? That's right. That's where we got to get those side businesses going. Get that hustle strong right now, because when they kick us off the airwaves, at least we'll be selling consumer products.
Buck, do you have a book?
Manufacturing Delusion, which your smart audience of literate people who like good writing and books and is a very large audience, therefore a lot of books should be bought, should please go get this book. And Dave, by the way, Dave is going to be very happy if you help me out on this one, because Dave's a friend and he's like, he will be sad for me if we don't sell a lot of books. So he's like, I will tell my people and they shall
It's
go.
true. We were going to do this in person. You wanted to protect me from your bubonic plague or whatever it is you have over there. And I said, we must do it digitally then so that we can move some books.
It's amazing. Caffeine and Imodium is a phenomenal combination, I will tell you. It like does great things in very opposite directions. So there we go.
And communication. If you're looking for thoughtful political conversations that won't raise your blood pressure too much, check out our politics playlist right here. And if you don't want to miss any future videos, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell.